Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Ronita Chaudhary. I am an assistant professor of practice at Jindal Global University. I am going to be leading this session today on understanding entrepreneurship and how to build future-ready businesses. Um, you can expect this to go for about maybe 40, 45 minutes, and then I will be taking questions at the end. So in the meantime, if you do have any questions regarding anything that I'm saying, so whether I can clarify a point or elaborate on something, or if there's just a question that you have, please feel free to put it in the question box. If you have any questions in regards to admissions, we have Himanshu and the wonderful team from admissions on this broadcast as well. So they'll be answering those questions. Please, again, put those in the question box. I do suggest sticking around for the full lecture. A lot of people will have different questions, and it can be very enlightening to hear other people's questions and get ideas from those. As far as any other housekeeping, I mean, today's subject is understanding entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship now is going to be, or here on forward, is going to be a bit different than entrepreneurship, say, the past few years, right? We're living through a monumental change. We all know that right now. Everyone's stuck at home. And while it's hard to say exactly what's going to happen, how the world is going to change, what the new normal is, and all those kind of things, there is still some ultimate themes that are going to continue. We all have to be ready for it. We have to prepare ourselves. We have to learn more. But they will stick, right? And that's how entrepreneurship has stuck through hundreds and hundreds of years. Entrepreneurship is nothing new, right? It's now, it was an old French term that now is, at its height right now. Everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. And there's a lot of historical context for that. The rise from, small businesses to the security and benefits of large corporations that's happened, say, the past 50, 60 years to now where we stand, where due to technology, it's really based on technology, due to the length and breadth of the internet and everything that's been built on top of that, the barriers of entry to starting a business has come down significantly. And now we can all, look at being entrepreneurs if we want. Successful, we'll have to see, but we can all at least try. A little bit about myself. As I mentioned, I'm currently teaching entrepreneurship at JGBS, Jindal Global Business School. I'm an entrepreneur myself. I currently run a company called Armadillo Digital with my partner. I have been part of failed startups that didn't work due to cash. I have been part of failed startups that didn't work because the entrepreneurship or the entrepreneur involved had lost trust between me and the team. I've been part of, at least in my company now, I mean, we're working primarily in incubation of new ideas, and we have a venture studio where we're trying to do that. And right now, one of our main clients is one of the largest digital finance companies, TransferWise. We're working with them, and we've worked here in India in the arts and culture space. We've worked with development organizations in Africa. And my background itself is I worked in finance, actually, in New York for about 9 years. I was in sales and marketing for an investment management firm where, selling mutual funds, stocks, bonds. I have my licenses to do all of those kind of things. So I was really in that world for a very long time. Corporate structure had, the pension and everything, but then I realized, this is the high time to try something new. And so from New York, I moved to India, and here we are today. So academically, I have my bachelor's in politics and economics from New York University. And I went on to get my master's in globalization and development from the University of Manchester in the UK. There, I was primarily looking at the role of India on the global stage in regards to value chains. So how does India move from, what is natural resource and manufacturing to new industries, right? Such as research and design, which, hold a lot more weight and are much more of higher value than just, steel production or ore production. No offense to Jindal. But so that's what I was looking at. And that's where entrepreneurship fits into all of this, is that India can be a home, and currently is a home, for tremendous entrepreneurship, an explosion in design, research, the knowledge economy, and all of that. So I'm very bullish on what India can do, and what that means is what all of you can do as well. There's a lot to go over in this lecture. So again, any questions, anything you want clarity on, please put them in the question box. Okay, let's go. Here's also my email address. I'll reiterate it at the end of the lecture as well. Okay, so this is what I get quite a bit. Let me just expand my screen. I want to run a startup. And a lot of people do, and I get it because I was there as well. Now, what is a startup and why does someone want to run one is the deeper questions here. If you're reading the newspaper or, reading digital magazines, all of that, it seems like a very exciting place to be. Oftentimes when I hear that someone wants to run a startup, it's more likely that they kind of want to just be wealthy and run a successful company, more than anything, right? And there are, of course, those that do want to innovate and start something new. But I suggest let's start at the beginning. If we're going to understand of where the future of business and entrepreneurship is going to go, let's figure out where it is and what it is at its core. Entrepreneurship starts with entrepreneurs, right? So an entrepreneur is someone, in its classic definition, someone that sees a gap in the market, sees an opportunity, and goes forward with it. Now, the difference with an entrepreneur or the similarities between entrepreneurship and a startup, although they're not exclusive, is that you tend to take on more risk because you're doing so without as many resources. You're taking on the risk to yourself, you're taking on the risk for your team, you're trying a new idea that hasn't been validated yet in the market. So these are the risks you're taking on. So that's really becomes the difference between all of these. Because there's entrepreneurship, which I'm sure many of you have heard of course. And then there's intrapreneurship, and they're two very different concepts. So entrepreneurs, typically outside of a corporate system, taking on risks themselves, reward is also higher. Intrapreneurship is when there is identification of opportunity and gaps and innovation and answering that gap or that opportunity, but within a corporate structure or within a structure that exists. Now, the benefits of being an intrapreneur is that if you're, an intrapreneur within a company, you tend to get the resources of that company, and the company bears the risk. So you take on less personal risk. And then versus an entrepreneur where you exist outside the company, you take on the risk, but then the rewards do also come higher because the risk is not mitigated by a larger company. Now, that larger company that an intrapreneur works in can also be a family business, right? So there are tremendous intrapreneurs within family businesses that are able to look at the resources that exist within the structure, able to mobilize them and try them out for a new idea, and that new idea itself blossoms out. And again, this is versus an entrepreneur that goes out on their own without taking on more risk, without the large corporate structure, etc. So an example would be of an intrapreneur, and of course this depends on the company culture as well, is the work that Apple does. Apple innovated a lot, and they had different areas of the company that would innovate within the company, right? So then when something new would come out, it would come out from within the company, but it would be the intrapreneurs within that who are innovating and trying new things, and Apple is taking on the risk as well as the reward. We see the benefits of entrepreneurship at the Apple store. But there is a whole graveyard of bad ideas that didn't work, or ideas that were wrongly timed for the market for entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, we all know them, right? We all know it's those that do take risks, that try something new. And unfortunately, with entrepreneurs and startups, I mean, the failure rate is high. And hopefully, things that you'll learn today, and then, at JGBS, we try to mitigate those risks. But we're not gonna give you, at least I'm not gonna give you a pathway of this is how you build a successful company, this is how you build a startup. All of you do know a lot more about your personal markets, your networks, how certain kinds of consumers, whether that's regional or local or in India or global, so the best kind of creativity comes out of those that are able to put the pieces together. And think within frameworks. So our entrepreneurship programs are really looking at providing frameworks and then having you guys be creative within that. Another point that I do want to make is a small business. Now, the difference between a small business and a startup is really the role of technology. So someone that wants to build or open a cafe, a new cafe, right? That's exciting and it's great, and maybe they'll have exciting foods, but ultimately that is a small business because they aren't using technology to scale. Startups, on the other hand, will build one product that can go to 100 million people. A small business means that one input means one output. So that's not, so it's one to one to one, right? To one customer. So you're not able to, give one cup of coffee to 100 million people, right? While a startup with technology involved can do that. And that's why startups are exciting, is because the scaling aspect of it. The scaling aspect of it is 100%, or primarily, I should say, dependent on technology, on the underlying technology, on the ability to connect people, access people, have people able to access your technology online. All of these things really, really matter. So I do see a lot of people come by with wonderful ideas. They are small businesses, and small businesses are great. I think they're very important for local communities. I think we're seeing right now how important small businesses within our neighborhoods and locally are very important, are able to help us out through difficult times, and you're able to build a stronger community that way. Nothing against small businesses, but there is a difference between what those two can do and how much they can scale. Okay. Let's move on from definitions. If there, again, if you need any clarity, please put that in the questions. Now, entrepreneurs, whether it's entrepreneurs, owners of small businesses, or those that run startups, the fact of the matter is that you want things to be better, right? You have an idea, you see an opportunity, you see that things could be done a better way, and you try to make that reality. So there is an inherent optimism to what entrepreneurs do in entrepreneurship in general. Entrepreneurship is incredibly important for society. It helps, whether there's been a crisis or war, entrepreneurs have always helped bring economies back during times like that, whether it's small business, etc. They help formalize law and regulation. They help formalize banking systems. Entrepreneurship as a whole is incredibly, incredibly important, because entrepreneurs, they all see that something can be better and something can be done, right? You're not looking around at the next guy next to you and just saying, oh, okay, I'll just do that and I won't improve, right? So there is an inherent optimism, there is an inherent positivity, and that's why we're seeing with entrepreneurship, with startups, that things are progressing so fast, because people are being able to find solutions. Now, one thing I do want to make clear is that the entrepreneurship that we're teaching here, and that I strongly believe in, is not a Silicon Valley copycat, right? We're not going to look at what Silicon Valley does and just say, okay, India, okay, JGBS students or Jindal students, this is what you have to do. Absolutely not. What's worked in Silicon Valley works because of its context. We are in an incredible, exciting market here, and we want to focus on what works and what is already existing here. And this idea of social impact, I mean, it's funny because in India, impact is ingrained in every single idea that's coming out, right? Because entrepreneurship businesses, they employ people, they employ local people, they integrate with local economies. These are all impact measures, right? That maybe in certain countries in the West, it's not as clear how a company is doing good. But here in India, it's whether you're hiring women or whether you're hiring, people that didn't have jobs before, or whether you're providing access to something that people didn't have access to before. These are all things that are making things better. And the impact is already absolutely ingrained in the larger businesses that we're seeing coming out of India, whether it's Biju or Big Basket, those kind of things. They already take into account, where there are gaps and how things can be done more transparently and with lower costs. So we're looking at not just, creating another hair care company, right? Which is nothing against hair care companies, but we're not looking at that. We're looking to solve the larger problems and solve the larger problems that people are facing here, right? So Paytm is another great example. I mean, banking for the unbanked and digital banking. I mean, these are really wonderful Indian ideas that are not only helping people, but it's helping to, reach the last mile, it's helping to employ, and it's furthering innovative ideas. There, of course, the issue with this on the flip side is that if you follow in such a scenario, right, where we're working in a market where there are still gaps and there's still things that can be improved, if we do follow the Silicon Valley model, Mark Zuckerberg is very well known for his saying, he started Facebook by, moving fast and breaking things. Now, if you do that, and that doesn't work here, if you're doing grocery delivery or Paytm, that actually does have significant consequences on people themselves and their ways of life. So impact is going to be core to a business that you're launching in India specifically. And what we're looking at with Startup JGU is making sure you understand what those impacts are, finding ways to deepen them, and finding ways to measure. And I think in an economy that is still growing, expanding, adapting with regulations, those kind of things, I think resilience and longevity is key here, right? And especially as leaders, the actual businesses that are gonna, have those huge valuations, if that's important to you, or the one that's gonna have the most amount of impact on people, are things that do take some time. So, I do, of course, promote businesses that are here for the longer term. Okay, family businesses. So I mentioned this earlier, that family business is, again, it's very core to business here in India, right? There's no getting around that fact. It's here, and it's a wonderful boon, right? We have people that, from such a young age have such experience in how very, very complicated matters work. And so with family businesses, there's two ways to go. I do know a lot of people, a lot of students that are looking to step away. That's perfectly fine, and do their own thing and be an entrepreneur outside. And then there are those that are interested in innovating within the family business, right? And under that idea of entrepreneurship. Right, so how can we utilize the resources better, take additional risks while the business still continues as is, but still grow out a different area of it. I'm currently working with a student in our RISE program, which is an experiential startup semester, whose father has a car business, and what he's looking to do is digitize the whole experience. And so we're working on that together. And that's something he's leading, and it's wonderful because this is really the innovation that can still be spread out to a lot of different businesses that that are existing and have worked a certain way. And it's going to be students like you and the younger generation that are going to be convincing, your parents that, hey, there's a better way to do things, there's a faster way to do things, and if we don't do it this way, someone else is going to, right? And part of that, to address that, we do speak quite a bit on soft skills. how to influence others, how to build strong arguments, and that whole process. And this, the second point is, how do you shift the course of the Titanic, right? When you have such large, heavy legacy industries that have been working for a long time, how do you start shifting, right? And how do you move it away, hopefully, from an iceberg, and try new tools and innovations? And, it can be a uphill struggle, but I think this is going to be important to what happens from here on out. And I think what's been going on with the coronavirus has accelerated this tremendously. And there are, open tools that we can all use to help update a lot of these family businesses. There's software, there's tools, there's different mechanisms. If anyone has any questions on these, please feel free to reach out to me. But I do want you to come away knowing that innovation can happen in family businesses, and innovation in family businesses is often quite strong, because if it is able to work and the ideas come together, the vision comes together, it can be really game changing. Okay, so throughout this remainder of the lecture, I'm going to talk on the big thoughts, right? Things that are quite universal, that are not specific to one sort of sector or industry or type of person. These are big thoughts on how to be a leader, how to create a vision, technology use in entrepreneurship, and creativity. So if we're going to start, number one important is vision. Simple as that. And it's not this whole idea that, every company or organization has like a vision and a mission and all those. It's not just about words on a page, right? A vision is really about you as an entrepreneur understanding where things are going, right? Because we're not trying with entrepreneurship with an entrepreneur. Let's just use that word for everything. With an entrepreneur, it's not about just recreating what's already happening, right? The most successful entrepreneurs see that the ball is going a certain direction and see that it's heading that way, and is like, what, I can see that that's going that way. What can I do now, right? So I see that the future is going to look a certain way. What can happen now? So it's not about looking at what's happening around you. It's looking at where are things going, and in that, understanding what the opportunity is, right? So a lot of the initial leaders for using the internet or building out the internet, they wanted to see that the internet be more than it was, right? And then they built and built and built, and then we have the internet that we have right now. And really, if we look at what a startup isn't, just a company and a company structure. It's actually, a founder or a set of founders that have an insight, right, into where the future is going, right? So, for example, with the student that I'm working with, whose father has a car business, he understood that the car industry was moving a certain way, or it was going to. It hadn't hit yet, but he saw that technology was being used in all these other different industries, and his, local industry wasn't using it. And he was like, I'm going to build something to, put something over that gap. I'm going to take advantage of that opportunity. And he's making it happen now. It's a very exciting story. And so the idea is that the founders are about the idea. It's not about, just yourself becoming wealthy or yourself, creating a name. It's about this idea and making the idea happen. And when you look at it that way of, things are building out a certain way, I have this idea that, this can be a solution for that, then you're much more open to taking different risks, but then also listening to feedback and adapting your idea and changing it for what's to come. And that's incredibly important. And, a fundamental insight is that a startup entrepreneur, it's the idea. A company, first is a company, right? A company already has a brand, already has resources, already has a team, it already has products. And with an entrepreneur, this is a hypothesis that you have. You don't have all of those resources. right? And so this becomes the difference between what these two entities can do, this individual or a group of founders versus a company. And basically, a startup or a good idea is, you know, you have to have a vision. You have to have an idea of where things are going, right? An example, of course, a very wonderful example coming out of JGU is the founders of Sleepy Owl, right? They didn't see that, they didn't look around and be like, okay, someone else is doing cold brew in India, I'll do it too. They saw that cold brew was something that they wanted, and it was happening elsewhere, and it wasn't happening for, here in India or around Delhi. It wasn't something that they could get very easily. But they saw that it was quite popular in other countries and other metropolitan areas. So they thought, okay, I'm gonna work on cold brew, and they, tried different recipes, and they, worked on the idea for a very long time, and then it's become what it is, right? So they brought that kind of future to now. And the next thing that they were able to do is have a very clear idea on cold brew coffee. It didn't get watered down. They were very strict on that idea that this is what they wanted to do. I put something here called, the horse versus the camel, where, and this could be a personal opinion of mine, but there's a joke out there, at least in the business community, that a camel is a horse made by a committee. So what the point of it being is that if you have a singular vision of what you want a horse to be, a horse is what's going to happen, right? Is what's going to be created. But if you don't have a singular vision and you have a committee of opinions and advice and, different voices that don't have a clear idea of what the vision is, you're going to end up with a camel, something that looks like a camel, but is actually supposed to be a horse, right? And that's my own personal opinion. I think a singular vision is the strongest thing that you can have in your toolbox. And it's the vision, again, not the product, that's most important. And when you're working with a startup, another analogy a lot of people make is that a startup is like jazz music, where there's a note and then someone else reacts to it and then someone else reacts to it, and it kind of goes in its own path. Versus a company, which is more of an army marching band, where there's clear notes, there's clear direction, and everyone moves that way. And the idea is that, of course, a startup does graduate to that, right? But don't expect that your startup should just be, everyone move by, specific sheet of music in a certain direction, and that's exactly how it has to happen. My own personal experiences, if you're working with a startup, you have to be open to changes, feedback, and moving forward. Okay. Next is really about digital first businesses. I think what coronavirus has shown us more than anything is that digital first is how it's going to be, and is who's going to survive going forward. And digital, we always do have to remember, technology is not just technology as an end goal. Technology is supposed to be used as a tool. So your end goal is something else, right? So if we look at Uber or Ola, the end goal is getting people from where they are to where they want to be easier. The technology is a tool to make it easier, more transparent, lower costs, but it's still a tool. So when you're looking at, creating a product or a service or whatever it might be, or what your vision is, the vision is the larger thing that you're able to enable people to do, whether it's people or businesses, etc. And as I mentioned before, when you're an entrepreneur, especially in the Indian context, you are creator right now. That's where the market stands. There is significant room for people to create and expand, rather than just copying something else that's happening in the country, right? So they look at Biju and all those kind of things. They are creator of industries. And this is why the Indian market is also very different from the Western market or the US market, where, there is still, things are much more systemized in certain ways, and so that's why people are, looking at solutions differently. In India, we have the ability to look at new industries and create new industries, do it with more transparency, do it with less costs, and we have the ability to formalize the informal in that way. And I mean, if we're looking at where things are going from here on out, a future-ready business, the key to this right now is going to be distributed teams. Because yes, it's a pandemic going on right now, but I'm going to say that these kind of volatile situations might continue. And the businesses that have distributed teams, and what I mean by that is that, the whole office isn't in one place. You don't have a physical office, and you've created systems, sometimes you might, but you've created systems for people to work remotely, so that if there are big changes, if there is volatility, the work can continue, the vision can still be met, right? And the benefits of distributed teams is not only the ability to work when there's crisis, but it's also the idea that you can actually be much more inclusive of who you hire. So now it's not only like, do you need to hire people that can come to a office from 9 to 5 every day? You can actually get very, very creative, smart, intelligent people as part of your teams who are maybe working in a different country, or have they need to be home, or there's stay-at-home wives that are now transitioning back into careers. So you all of a sudden get to tap into a talent pool that is much larger with distributed teams and remote work. It can be much more inclusive. It can be a results-only work environment where it's no longer about like how many hours are you sitting in the chair at your desk, but it's actually more about what are you getting done, and are you getting it done in time. And I think this results-only work environment, ROWE, is going to be very, very key going forward, and especially with remote work and distributed teams, where it's no longer about, who's in the office, up till what time, and how long is everyone staying, but are you getting your work done? Which is going to make it much more competitive in certain ways, but it also will build in additional flexibility for workers and for yourself. And so this distributed network type of work, it's software defined, right? It's only able to work because there are things like webinars and Zoom and tools like Slack or Airtable, all which are distributed and remote. So even currently with the client that I'm working with in London, it's completely remote work. My colleague there, my client there, I mean, we touch base over web meeting once a quarter, say exactly what the plan is, and then the rest of it is all over email. I'm here in Delhi, he's over there in London. Distributed teams, one more thing. Distributed teams is also a great way to scale, right? Because now you don't need office space and infrastructure and those kind of things. You can actually start to grow and almost have different teams in different time zones. So even while you're sleeping, you still have a team working away. So yeah, I did want to address this idea of the unicorn. I know it's such a buzzword right now. Everyone wants to have a unicorn or work for a unicorn, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, in my personal opinion, I'm not so impressed by just the unicorns. Yes, it's quite a bit of money that companies are valued at, and hopefully the valuation is done stringently and the profitability is accurately looked at. But what I think for true, sustainable, profitable businesses, not to go after the camel at all, but is something like a camel. On the good side though, right, where it's not a camel made by a committee, but a camel, right? The unicorn it's called a unicorn, it got named that because it is a mythical creature, right? It's not always, you're not always able to get it or reach it. But Alec Lasro, who's a venture capitalist at Cathay Innovation, he calls, especially what's going on in Asia, he's like camels. And what's amazing about camels is that they are incredibly tough. They're very resilient. They can manage through the harshest environments that there are in the world, but they can still run very, very fast. They drink water faster than anything you know, but they run fast and they're able to survive. So this idea of resilience is key. Again, when we go through crisis, when there aren't crises, can you make it far and can you make it long? So instead of becoming a unicorn that, you know, is going to be, I don't know, the ratio of becoming a unicorn, or, you know, just aiming your vision towards being a unicorn isn't solving a problem. It's not improving people's lives. It's much more of a, you know, maybe a financial benefit that you're after. Let's try to make some camels that are strong, resilient, hardworking, smart with their money, and know when to take advantage of the right opportunities. The last few I'm going to go through quickly because I see that it's already 12:40. Leadership. You know, the amazing things about people like Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates is not the fact that they started these companies, but what people are actually impressed with them by is the fact that they continue to run them. Because what it takes when you start a company, the kind of leadership that you need to have and the kind of leader you need to be has to continually adapt as your company goes from one person to two people to 10 to 100 to 1,000 to, you know, 100,000 people working for you. You can't stay the same sort of leader. You need to adapt. You need to constantly learn. And you need to also put your ego aside when someone is giving you feedback. So this idea that, are you different every year? And one thing that a lot of people that meet with Mark or Bill Gates say is that it's almost like meeting a different person every year because they've learned throughout the year. They've changed their management styles and they're continuing. The best CEOs are the ones that can adapt through the whole process. Yeah, you know, nowadays you do hear that, you know, a lot of founders are kind of that disagreeable, tough kind of leaders. Now, there's one thing about being tough and disagreeable when it's for a larger cause and for the larger vision. It's different if it's for your ego, if you want to be right, right? So when you're thinking of leadership, think about the truth, what needs to be heard. Being truthful and hearing reality and taking feedback and understanding when things aren't going well is going to be much better for you than anything else. You know, make sure you realize as you continue with your businesses and entrepreneurship, make sure that you realize the lies you're telling yourself. This is something I've learned too. You know, you have an idea and you stick with it and you just kind of try to ignore other problems. I've gone through it, and you know, you hopefully learn every single time. But make sure you recognize it, because you can look at a problem, you could recognize it, and you can move on and then be 10 times faster, or you can look at a problem, recognize it, and ignore. Okay? And then try to be right on top of that. So continue to learn. Don't search for approval, don't search for accolades or headlines or, you know, newspaper interviews. Focus on your big idea. That's more important than anything. That's more important than your ego. And when you focus on the big idea is when communities improve, people's lives improve, the nation improves, all of that. Last but not least, I mean, quite an important point, the machines are taking over. Granted, we're controlling them to a certain extent. Who's in control is a question, but they are, right? Machine learning, AI, it is taking over. And humans are going to be able to excel in the spaces where machines and AI can't. And that is creativity right now. Creativity is one of the major beacons of what's going to drive things going forward. So not in a way that it's, you know, things are certain, have to go a certain path. Again, feel free to, you know, whatever career path you go on going forward, that it is more like jazz, that you follow it, you try different things, you try different notes, you try different products, you try different services, but be creative. That more than anything is going to be, and especially if we look at startup ideas or entrepreneurship ideas that have different factors in it, right? So it's not just, you know, I do accounting, but it's I do accounting for arts, or, you know, you start building on a central idea with more of a holistic elements within it. All of a sudden, the likelihood of you becoming redundant, of your idea not working out, is it reduces. And again, on the creativity in terms of skill, I would say just make sure if you are going to lead a company, if you're going to be a CEO, make sure you're a good storyteller. I would say that. Be a good storyteller. Make sure you can tell your story well, because you need that for whether you're hiring your first team and you have an idea and it's crazy. You need to tell your team a story. You need to tell them what that story is. Why is it important? Why is it important that we complete this vision? You need to do that for your parents if you're in a family business. What is the story here that your solution is going to provide, right? What is it going to change? How are things going to get better if they incorporate this new idea? But you also need to tell the story of your journey and your idea to investors as well. It's constant storytelling. I mean, again, marketing, and that's a whole other session, needs to be all about that. Learn how to tell stories. The best leaders do. My personal opinion is that Daniel Pink, fantastic author and writer, I would suggest read his books. He wrote a very what I think is a very important book, and I read it maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, called The Left-Brained World, where he talks about a lot of things about what the world is going to be requiring going forward. But he also has written a book called Drive, which I thought was very prescient on the idea of what future workers want, how should companies be built, and again, around this idea of creativity. Lastly, I think adapt to context. Don't be a copycat. Don't see what's going on in the US or Australia or Europe and just say, I'm going to do the same thing here. Adapt to context. That's more likely going to make you resilient. It's going to be able to get the right kind of workers that you want and then achieve the vision that you're looking for. So I know I went through the last few slides quite quickly, but these are my takes on the big thoughts for future ready businesses. I hope that, as leaders, you can incorporate them. This is startupjgu.edu, which is the Startup JGU website. There are recommendations on there for podcasts, for books to read, as well as resources I suggest you checking out. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And I'm getting the notification that it's time to take questions. So should we start? Okay. Give me 1 second as we do this. Okay, how to find an investor at ideation stage. Okay, so this one, thanks, Aryan. Great question. There's an aspirational answer to this, and there's like a realistic answer to this. The aspirational answer that maybe books or people would like to tell you is that if you have the strongest idea, if it's validated, if you have a MVP, like a minimal viable product, just have a strong story, have that value proposition, make sure you understand make sure it's clear what the customers are getting, and then meet with as many people as you can, right? Network, meet, show them your presentation, hustle, have all that, right? That's what people say, and that's the aspirational answer. The realistic answer is, for the majority, it's always friends and family. At the ideation stage, that seed money, I think realistically the number is about 60 to 70% of seed money comes from friends and family. Kabir Sharma, great. So entrepreneurs get lower rewards. So great question. It's understanding what the rewards are. If I start my own business and it succeeds, right, outside of a company, and I'm an entrepreneur, I get all the accolades, right? My name is known as the founder of that company. I get 100% of the equity share, right? So I own the company, and it's my idea, IP, right? If you're an entrepreneur, what happens is that you're creating and innovating within a company structure. So in most cases, your equity share is questionable, if you have any, or whatever you do have is diluted amongst others. So ownership of that idea as well, intellectual property, it's not going to be yours, it's going to be the company's. And yeah, maybe that name recognition, founder is not going to be there because you're not the founder of the company. So those sort of things are what entrepreneurs sort of give up in this idea of taking less risk as well, right? Because I mean, the majority of startups and ideas do fail. So entrepreneurs can have less risk, but they also have less reward in that case. Let's see now. Okay. Small businesses don't have any fear of losing ownership. So with the small business, it depends on the company's structure, who owns it and who has equity ownership. So ownership is still similar, right? Whether you own it or you have a few people owning share of that company or that business. So losing ownership doesn't really account in this unless you get funding within your small business from an investor. If your ownership of it decreases below 51% because the investor comes in, which is also the same for the startup, right? It's all about equity ownership. So you choose if you want to give up ownership or not. That's still a choice. Hopefully. I know there are some stories about, say, WeWork, where he was forcibly given up ownership. Different story though. But again, it's how you set it up and how you set up the equity ownership. Paytm has changed a lot of lives. Absolutely, a lot of lives, and it's really, it's been game changing for a lot of Indians, a lot of people across the country and more. And that was a wonderful way that innovative idea, gap in the market, address last mile, digital payments, great story overall. But it's been long, right? Paytm's had a very, very long story. Okay, Aditya, how are the markets going to change post-COVID, and how challenging will it be for the rising entrepreneurs? Whew, okay, the markets are going to change. It's going to be difficult. That is without a doubt. It's going to be painful. There's going to be a lot of job losses. And it is going to be a time that those that are digital first, remote working, are going to succeed. It's much more relatively, much more than those that are very worker, factory, human-based kind of work, because it's very unclear when those things are going to open up and business is going to get back to normal, right? So those that are more tied to physical goods are going to struggle. That being said, there are some, I'm sitting here in Delhi, there are some, grocery and those kind of small startups that are doing fantastically well during this whole period because they're able to deliver and take orders online. So anyway, those that can do digital best first, operate that way, can take orders, can communicate, can have teams working, synchronized digitally, are gonna do really well. So for rising entrepreneurs, this is going to be a time where physical product and services are going to be a struggle, right? Digital products, and that can even be things like graphic design, right? That's a digital product. Graphic design, marketing, content writing, all these kind of things. If you're looking to start your own agency or things like that, this can be a wonderful time to kind of come in and come out of all of this. I mean, it's going to be true that money is not going to be as available right now. There's going to be a lot of money, of course, that would have gone into investing into and taking higher risks, going into other solutions. So this might be the time to lean on the family and friends that I mentioned earlier. Talking about startup, I would like to ask if the student will get some free time to work on their startup. So I'm going to pitch you on my program, which is called RISE, and it's a full semester-long, it's a semester-long program where students get to work on their startup the entire time. Interestingly enough, maybe also tied to the last question, is that I had already made the program a blended online offline program from the start. So if you're interested in Rise, you would submit all of your admissions, you would do your weekly reflections, meeting log, resources are all through a personalized dashboard I've created for the students. So I was already looking at this program, so I'm just going to reply to the other question, digital first, right? And so now what's happened with, all the university taking a break during COVID and stuff like this, and now soon to restart, I actually haven't had to change my program very much. It's just that the in-person 50%, 40% is just now going to be done on Zoom. So that changeover was much smoother than other classes, right? It's because I built up these digital tools. So digital tools for rising entrepreneurs. If you want to work on your startup, join the Rise program. If you can't do that, there is Startup JGU, and that will help you, think through your ideas, give you the tools you need. Let's see. Do you think there's a common path every startup should take, step by step, to go from zero to market, reducing it with the risk of failures? Yes and no. I think, as corny as it might sound, I do think there are certain things that every startup should do. And that is be a learning organization, have your leaders be learners, adapt. I think reflection exercises on what is working in your company and not working, I think that's incredibly important and should be done weekly. Identify where there are challenges, identify where there's weak links, and that can be a person as well. Focus on the larger vision, I'd say. Read, learn, watch, but contextualize. Don't copy. Identify your market, identify your consumer, identify exactly what you're trying to do. Hear advice. Don't seek it. Don't seek opinions and things like that, or don't seek approval. Hear advice, but contextualize constantly. And there are certain things otherwise. It's first, if you're looking at like the book way of doing things, it's like identify the opportunity. You do that by looking at your market, who exists in it, who doesn't, what have they tried, has it worked or not, those kind of things. Identify an opportunity, identify the team and resources that you need, create an MVP, which is a minimal viable product. So what is the least amount of resources you need to make a version of your product? Test it out, see if people want to buy it. See if it needs to be improved, constantly improve that until you realize there is something here that customers want to buy and people are knocking on your door for it. And then kind of figure out what's next, depending on your product. That could be a significant amount of money. If you need to do, like, say, bio things, you need a lot of money for research and moving that forward. Or it can be, some sort of seed capital going in. And, a lot of startup or entrepreneurs, it's a difficult decision between, staying, if you have a startup idea, staying with your job and focusing on your startup. Do you leave your job before working on your startup, or do you have to work on it side by side? And those are tricky things to decide, right? And that's kind of risks you have to decide, and depends on your own risk tolerance. I hope that helped. 8 tips on going for a startup on pilot scale. I think I would need more context on that. Sorry, Tanya. It depend on, I'm guessing you're asking whether to join one or not. I would say it depends. It really depends. Make sure you're doing it for the idea or for learning, right? So say that there is someone really intelligent, smart, has had a lot of experience, and they're trying something new, right? If you're going to learn from them, that's one way to look at it. Like, okay, I want to learn how this, how she leads and how she runs a startup and how that happens. That's a great way to then say do something or move on to the next thing. Otherwise, I think if you go if you join a startup just because it's your friends or your family, I mean, they're not going to have the input and passion that they need. And startups are really hard to keep working for, very little pay and all hours when you have so many other things going on. So overall, just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Right? Let's see. I have a question. What's your take on trading marketing country versus production-oriented country? Sanjeev, if you can reword that, I want to get a little bit more clarity on what you mean by trading marketing country. Okay. So Sankalp has mentioned that taking successful ideas from other countries also reduce risk. So why is it not a good idea to take ideas from other countries? I know every country has different business environment, but any other reason you have for not taking ideas from other countries? No, I mean, the idea is not to not be inspired. I'm not saying that. Look around, learn, be inspired. But my problem is when it's copycatting, right? When it's, oh, I saw exactly how XYZ is done over there, I'm going to do the exact same thing, right? That doesn't work. That doesn't work at all because you are not understanding your context and your consumers. So of course, if you're seeing kombucha is doing really well in New York and you're like, okay, I'm going to start a kombucha company here because I think consumers here want it. That's very, very different from being like, okay, I'm going to start a kombucha company in Delhi and sell it the exact way it's done in New York, or brand it exactly how it's done in New York, or have the exact New York flavors, and I'm not going to use any Indian flavors. That doesn't work. That's all I'm saying. I think inspiration is important, but I think contextualization is more important than that. Okay, when starting out, what is more useful and smart to get an individual investor, group of private investors, or bank loan? Depends on the industry and depends on the sector. I would say starting out, I don't want to give advice, so there should be some sort of disclaimer that if anything happens to your business from this, like I'm not responsible. But I would say that it is individual, family, friends, investors will be much more forgiving. That's all I'm going to say on that. And depends on how early. And the thing is, there is, think of your business as, there's 1.0, there's 0.0, there's 1.0, there's 2.0, there's 3.0. It's not just a one-time and done thing, right? So who your investors are at 1.0 can be very different, family, friends, say, than who they are at 2.0. And that doesn't mean that your business is only stuck with those people, right? 2.0 or 1.6 can then be other investors or group of private investors. So there is a scale and there's a journey here. Yeah, I've just seen that again, individual investors are much more forgiving if things don't work out or things take longer to recoup, a lot more forgiving in the start. And here's something too, you can be your own individual investor too, right? So I mean, to be honest, I did that myself. I saved up for 4 or 5 years and then started my own thing. So that can be you, and then other investors can come along the way. Can 14-year-olds start a business if they really want to? Yes, I think so. I tried to open a dog treat business when I was like 12 or something like that. It actually did pretty well. I partnered with our vet practice that was in town, so I'd sell my treats at the vet practice. What kind of messed up was that I didn't meet the dog walkers or I could only sell my product after school, so I'd go to school and then I'd sell it, and it didn't work because then I'd have to be home by 5 o'clock and do my homework. So, but yes, long story short, 14-year-olds can start a business. Just make sure you know what you're doing. How are you coping with the pandemic situation as an entrepreneur? What kind of problems have you faced and did you tackle them? So interestingly enough, I always enjoyed and this is just personal, I've always enjoyed remote working. And that has actually been the biggest boon through all of this, is that my work has not gotten disrupted. And so I'm saying a lot of this from experience. I haven't, if anything, my work has increased just because I can continue to work as long as I have internet, right? So I'm very fortunate. I am super, super fortunate. I mean, the university has also been doing a fantastic job on getting things online and working online. So the transition to digital was very smooth, and if anything, it's been good. One of my brands, I have started about like a year old. I started a brand of products. I was working with local artisans, and yeah, now that's completely shut, right? Because that was dependent on physical product and mailing and shipping to the US and Europe and all those kind of things. So that is completely shut. It is, I'm trying to find out a way to get masks made by self-help groups, but they're right now in Chandigarh. I'm not able to get them to Delhi. So that business has come to a complete halt. And it was actually a business I was very passionate about and I really enjoyed. But I mean, what can you do, right? And I'm still in a very much more fortunate position with my other work. Thankfully, I diversified with additional other kinds of, ideas and work and etc. That I haven't had to, things haven't broken down because I've had to shut that shop, but I think I've lost a business. Let's see though. Let's see. Depends on when things open back up. Okay. How many more questions can I take? I know it's 1:05. Let's see. Yeah, so okay, I'll quickly just two-word answers. Many copycats have established successful businesses with an innovation. What do you think? Yes, I agree. I think, and I think the key words here is the innovation part, right? Make sure you innovate. And it's easy at the idea stage to just say, oh, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it in India, right? Or I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to do it in Bombay, where location becomes the differentiator, right? What that differentiation is very, very, very important. So that it's not just physical location consumer change, right? That it is innovation, that is contextualized, that it is a system that works for everyone throughout the supply chain, right? I mean, this is why Ola is sometimes doing a lot better than Uber, right? Ola is, as a whole, from what I understood from the latest news, is that Ola drivers do enjoy working for Ola more than they do Uber. So it's make sure that every single thing is, again, contextualized. You have innovated for what's required. Now, if there was like, if you took something from Silicon Valley and then applied it to, you did a cut copy of Silicon Valley and placed it somewhere else and then you innovated there, I mean, that's different, right? But I think why a lot of businesses fail is that they're not contextualizing and they're not innovating. So if you're innovating, contextualizing, you're good. No problem with copycats there. What else? With COVID scenario kicking in, starting a paradigm shift in CSR consciousness, is it more fruitful to align efforts to come up with ideas for a startup in this field? Let's see. Okay, I think the idea here is have a clue of where you think things are going, right? Don't focus on what exactly is happening right now or the next 3 months. Focus on what you think India is going to be like and how it's going to change, or wherever you are, within a year from now, right? Because it's going to take you some time to get started and all of that. So what is the CSR consciousness a year from now? What is the industry consciousness a year from now? Which businesses are really going to be growing or going to be needed for that matter, right? Delivery services are probably going to continue to be needed a year from now. So focus on that. I got a lot of pushback when I said that, I think I might move into masks. I got a lot of pushback because everyone said like, oh, well, everyone's going to do that, right? Because it's all needed right now. Is it going to be needed a year from now, 2 years from now? It's a very valid question, and I'm digesting that before deciding what to do. So again, keep the longer vision. It's difficult to start up a business within a week, a month, all of that. What is the larger question you're trying to answer and what is the larger situation you're trying to solve. Okay, I tried to cover most of them. If there is anything I am missing or you still haven't felt like I addressed properly, or if you have any new ideas, please feel free to email me. I'll bring that back up here on the main screen. That's my email address, so you can email me. And I think with that, I'll take your leave. I hope to see many of you at Jindal. It's a wonderful university. There's a lot of innovation happening, especially in the startup space, in the entrepreneurship space. One thing that I think I'm just going to leave you with, it's really important that, you know, we're very clear that Jindal is not a tech university. It's not an IIT. We're not trying to do that. The leaders that we're trying to build are ones that are going to be, you know, looking at the larger picture, seeing how impact can be done, seeing how people's lives can actually improve with their innovation. And that can lead in a much more humanistic way, right? It's not just all about profits or who makes the most money. We know that, right? So our leadership and what we're trying to inculcate with all of you at the university is a larger sense of leadership, a larger sense of entrepreneurship, one that you're able to lead teams and do a fantastic job. And those teams can include IT and tech teams and all those kind of stuff, but we're talking about the individual as an entrepreneur and the individual as a leader. All right. So again, feel free to email me. I'm going to be available on LinkedIn as well as my JGU email. All right. Thank you.